Next, the French government insisting it will still enact tough measures against illegal migration after the National Assembly rejected its flagship immigration bill. It plans to form a special parliamentary commission with the aim of returning the bill to lawmakers for a vote. Now, this bill has been a key part of President Emmanuel Macron's attempts to show he can be tougher on law and order issues, while also keeping France's doors open to foreign workers who can help the economy. For more on this story, we welcome Paul Smith to the program. He is a historian and associate professor in French and Francophone studies at the University of Nottingham. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this came as a shock to the French government. So should we read this special commission as a compromise by Macron or a sign of surrender?
It's certainly the first, a compromise, an attempt to compromise with the Senate, but to use the Senate as a way of getting the legislation through the National Assembly. That's what it exists for, this particular form of joint committee of the Senate and the National Assembly. The advantage to the government is that it meets behind closed doors, so the exact terms of what they thrash out between the two houses will only be known at the end. But yes, it's an attempt to find a way to get the legislation through.
So what can you tell us about how this special commission is going to work exactly?
Okay, well, what will happen is there will be 7 members of the Senate, 7 members of the National Assembly representing the interests of their various assemblies. And of course, what that means is that the Senate delegation will be dominated by the right and centre right, and they'll very strongly be urging the government to go for a version of the legislation that came to the National Assembly, the version that the Senate had drafted. The National Assembly will be a bit more fractured in its approach because it will also have to represent its various different groups. And it may well be that, and we had exactly the same thing with the pensions reform, actually, that the legislation that emerges is a kind of hybrid of what the government wants and what the Senate wants, and then they will try to get that through the National Assembly. But whether that will actually work will very much depend on the attitude of Les Républicains, not so much in the Senate, but in the National Assembly.
So maybe you could just break down a few of the changes that the left-wing opposition parties that tanked this bill in the National Assembly, what are they asking for?
Well, the original legislation that Macron came up with was supposed to try to satisfy both sides. So, for example, from the left's perspective, what he was offering the left was a process of regularising the situation for illegal immigrants in France, that there would be a process by which they could get their papers in order, as it were. So that was what this kind of stretching out towards the left was. But on the right, it was making the process of dealing with migration immigrants much tougher, and also reducing the amount of assistance that they receive when they arrive in France, so health and social security, for example. So the original idea was to try to reach out to both sides from the centre. And when Macron thought that probably wouldn't work, he thought about splitting the bill, actually. And then the president of the Senate, Gérard Larcher, didn't so much veto it, but certainly said that's not going to get through the Senate. We won't have that because he's of the Les Républicains. So Macron found himself back at square one, and that's where the objections of the left come from, that it's lost the process of regularising the situation for migrants, and from the right, of course, particularly the far right, that it's just not tough enough. But also, of course, they will vote against it because they're not going to give Macron any kind of leeway.
Now, the biggest loser in this situation is seen as Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin. Can you just explain why this was seen as such a setback for him and his agenda?
Yes, absolutely. Well, he's the Interior Minister, so it's his law to pilot through Parliament in the first instance. It's his responsibility. He's been something of a political weather vane. He's been playing to the crowd in the Senate, sort of offering inducements to say, yes, it will be a law which is all about being tough on migration. But then when he's appeared in front of the National Assembly, he's kind of gone the other way. And then this weekend, I think he very seriously misjudged the mood as well, to say that, don't worry, it's not going to get voted down. This vote of rejection, refusing to even debate the bill, it won't get through. And that kind of put people's backs up. But I think he's also tried to kind of dance to two different tunes, and the consequence of that is that he's fallen down the middle. And then, okay, they lost by 5 votes. There were 9 members of the majority who didn't turn up to vote, suggesting that they didn't want to be seen to vote for this bill because it was too tough. That's certainly the position that I've seen one of those who didn't turn up taking. So Darmanin is really under the spotlight now, and although his resignation's been rejected for the time being, if a new version of the bill or whatever emerges from the committee doesn't get through, then his days, I think, would be numbered.
Paul Smith from the University of Nottingham, thank you for helping break down this complicated story. Appreciate your time.